Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're cracking open Amazon's 2004 shareholder letter, a real treasure trove of insights into their early business philosophy and the strategies that fueled their, kind of huge growth.
Yeah, their growth has been pretty remarkable.
It really has. And we've got two main guides for our exploration today. We have the actual letter itself, straight from Jeff Bezos, and we have a document with some thought-provoking questions about the letter to help us navigate. It's like having a treasure map and a guide all in one.
It is a pretty unique opportunity to get inside the mind of one of the world's, well, most successful entrepreneurs. We can decode his thinking, go beyond just the business jargon, and really understand the core principles that drive Amazon.
Okay, let's jump right in. Bezos makes a pretty bold statement right off the bat. He says free cash flow per share is the ultimate measure of a company's financial health, even more important than earnings. So for anyone who's not a financial expert, earnings are basically the profit a company reports. So why would free cash flow be more important?
That's a great question. Bezos argues that earnings can be, kind of manipulated, and they don't always tell the whole story about a company's cash situation.
Right.
A company might look profitable on paper, but if they're spending way more than they're bringing in, they could actually be bleeding cash.
So like a company could be making a ton of sales, but if they're not managing their cash flow, they could be in trouble.
Exactly. Think of it this way. A company could be investing a lot in growth, like building new factories or expanding into new markets. And those investments, they can use up a lot of cash, even if the company's showing strong earnings on paper. Free cash flow helps you see past the accounting and really grasp like the real cash dynamics of the business.
Okay, starting to get it now, but why should I care about free cash flow? How does this connect back to,
Mm.
me?
Well, whether you're thinking about investing in a company or making decisions in your own business, free cash flow is a really powerful tool. It helps you cut through all the noise and see the real financial health of a company. You can evaluate whether their growth is sustainable or if they're just burning through cash. And if you're an entrepreneur, it helps you make sure you're building your own growth strategy on a solid financial foundation.
That's a really valuable insight. It's about looking beyond just the surface and understanding the true drivers of a company's success.
Exactly. And that focus on the fundamentals, on building long-term value, that's a recurring theme in this letter.
Yeah, I see that. Bezos even reprinted his 1997 shareholder letter within the 2004 letter. It's like he's reminding everyone that this long-term approach has been their focus from the very beginning.
He really emphasizes the importance of delaying gratification, making decisions that might not have an immediate payoff, but that will build a stronger, more resilient business in the long run.
And that's really interesting to me, especially in today's world where everyone seems obsessed with short-term results and quarterly earnings, but Bezos was willing to play the long game. Do you think that was a key factor in their ability to disrupt so many industries?
I think so. Definitely. This long-term vision let Amazon make these really bold investments. They could withstand short-term pressures and, well, ultimately achieve the dominant market position they have now. They weren't afraid to pour resources into things like building infrastructure, developing new technologies, or expanding into new unproven markets. And those investments might have hurt their earnings in the short term, but they created the foundation for that incredible growth they've experienced.
So they were building for the future, even if it meant giving up some immediate gains.
Exactly. They were focused on creating something that would last, something that would deliver value for both customers and shareholders for years to come.
That's a pretty big contrast to the short-term thinking you see so often in business today.
It is, and is a powerful reminder that sometimes the best strategies take patience, a willingness to think long term.
Okay, so we've got free cash flow, long-term thinking. What else does Bezos highlight as being essential to Amazon's success?
Well, another critical factor is their intense focus on the customer. Bezos says the customer is at the heart of everything they do at Amazon.
Okay, but this whole customer obsession thing, wasn't it also used to justify some pretty aggressive business tactics, like squeezing suppliers or undercutting competitors? How do we reconcile that with this, customer-first philosophy?
That's a really good point. It's important to remember that, yeah, Amazon's approach has definitely had some controversy. But Bezos' focus in this letter is on exceeding customer expectations, making the shopping experience as smooth and enjoyable as possible, and always striving for improvement. He talks about specific things they did to enhance the Amazon store back in 1997, like adding gift certificates, that one-click shopping feature, and more reviews and content.
So even back then, they were laser focused on building customer loyalty. By creating a super convenient and personalized experience.
Yes, exactly. It's about building that trust and going above and beyond what customers expect, not just meeting the bare minimum.
It's like they were pioneers in using technology to make the whole customer journey better. And that's something any business can learn from, no matter how big or small or what industry they're in.
For sure. In a world that's becoming more and more digital, building that personal connection with customers can really set you apart.
So we've got free cash flow, long-term thinking, customer obsession. What other gems can we unearth from this letter?
Well, another key piece is their willingness to invest in growth, even if it means they might have to delay profitability in the short term.
Okay, so they weren't afraid to spend money to make money.
Right. They were willing to take calculated risks to invest in new areas and expand their offerings, even if it meant they might have to sacrifice some profit in the short term. Bezos believed that this aggressive reinvestment strategy was crucial for getting to the scale they needed for their business model to really work.
It's like they were playing the long game here, too,
Yeah,
focusing on building this massive interconnected ecosystem instead of chasing those quick wins. And that really highlights the importance of strategic investment and having a clear vision for the future.
absolutely. It's a reminder that sometimes the most successful path isn't a straight line. You have to be willing to take some risks, have the patience to stick with your vision, and be ready to invest in the long-term future of your business.
But even with the best strategies in the world, you need the right people to make it all happen, right?
Totally agree. And Bezos definitely emphasizes the importance of building a strong team. He talks about how Amazon is super focused on hiring and keeping talented employees. He even shares a pretty interesting anecdote about his interview style. He used to tell interviewees straight up, you can work long, hard, or smart, but at Amazon.com, you can't choose 2 out of 3.
Wow, that's intense. Work long, hard, or smart, but not 2 out of 3. He definitely demanded a lot from his employees. But was this approach actually sustainable? Did it end up contributing to the criticisms we hear about Amazon's work culture?
That's a great question and definitely something worth exploring more. But Bezos was clearly all about setting high standards and creating a culture of excellence. He also emphasized the importance of making sure employee incentives were aligned with shareholder interests.
How did they do that?
He highlights using stock options as a big part of their compensation packages. The idea is to make everyone feel like they're an owner, truly invested in the company's success over long term.
Interesting. It's about creating that sense of ownership and shared purpose, which can be really powerful in driving a company forward.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that long-term thinking. Bezos wanted to build a team that was passionate, driven, and all working together to build something truly remarkable.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Amazon's focus on free cash flow, long-term thinking, customer obsession, strategic investment, and building a strong team. It's fascinating to see how these core principles that he lays out in this letter have played such a big role in Amazon's journey. But before we move on, I want to touch on those specific improvements to the Amazon store that Bezos mentioned. Those seemingly small changes actually reveal a lot about their customer-centric approach, right?
Totally. They might seem pretty ordinary now, but they were really innovative back in 1997.
Yeah. Let's unpack those enhancements and see what they tell us about Amazon strategy in part 2.
Picking up where we left off, let's dive a little deeper into those Amazon store enhancements that Bezos talks about. Those changes they made back in 1997. They might seem small, looking back from today, but they actually say a lot about their focus on the customer.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, from our perspective in 2023, but those are big deals at the time, like gift certificates. I mean, those are so standard now, but for online retailers back then, that was a big innovation.
Exactly. It shows how they were always thinking about ways to improve the customer experience, to make it more convenient, more enjoyable. And it wasn't just about adding, fancy features. They were trying to solve real problems that customers were having.
Like one-click shopping. Remember having to fill out those long forms online just to buy something? Amazon simplified it, made it so easy. Buy with just one click.
It seems obvious now, but back then, it was revolutionary. It's a perfect example of how they use technology to remove friction from the buying process, and that focus on convenience is a huge part of why they've been so successful.
And it wasn't just about making it easier to buy. They wanted to make the whole experience more informative and engaging. That's where the customer reviews and expanded product content came in.
And remember, this is 1997. The internet was still pretty new. People were still getting used to, actually buying things online. Amazon understood that trust was key. And one way to build that trust was to give customers as much information as possible.
Yeah. Like they were saying, don't just take our word for it, see what other customers are saying. It made the whole experience feel more transparent, more authentic.
And it worked. Customer reviews became, they're one of the most valuable things on their website, helping shoppers make better decisions. It's a strategy that pretty much everyone uses now in e-commerce, but Amazon was one of the first.
It's amazing how those early decisions shaped how we shop online today. They were ahead of the curve. But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about another big theme from the letter. Amazon's willingness to invest in growth, even if it meant waiting on profitability.
Yeah, Bezos makes it clear he's playing the long game, prioritizing market share and long-term value over short-term profits. And that took a lot of trust from their investors.
It did. Wall Street, they're all about those quarterly earnings, but Bezos was essentially saying, trust me on this one. And well, he was right.
What's really interesting is that Bezos is very upfront about the risk involved in this strategy. He admits that not every investment is going to be a winner, but he's okay with taking those risks because he believes the potential rewards outweigh them.
That kind of mindset is so important for any entrepreneur or innovator. You have to be willing to experiment, to try things, to fail sometimes, and learn from those failures. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from taking those big swings.
Exactly. It's about having a growth mindset, being open to new ideas, and constantly pushing the limits. And that attitude is like baked into Amazon's culture.
And speaking of culture, Bezos also spends a good chunk of the letter talking about building a strong team. He highlights their tough hiring process, the emphasis on stock options, and the expectation that everyone at Amazon is going to work really, really hard.
Like he famously said, you can work long, hard, or smart, but at Amazon.com, you can't choose 2 out of 3.
Right. It's definitely a demanding work environment, to say the least. But you can see that Bezos is passionate about building a culture of excellence where everyone's on the same mission, striving to build something incredible together.
And that shared mission comes through so clearly in how he talks about their commitment to the customer. It's not just a slogan, it's a core value that shapes everything they do.
It's about making the customer the center of every decision, always looking for ways to improve their experience and building those long-lasting relationships based on trust and value.
And that's something that any business can learn from Amazon, no matter what industry they're in, how big or small they are. Building that customer-centric culture is key to long-term success.
Totally agree. It's about understanding that your customers are your lifeblood. Treating them right isn't just the ethical thing to do, it's good business.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about the downsides of all this? What about the criticisms of their workplace culture or their impact on small businesses?
Yeah, those are important concerns, and it's important to acknowledge that Amazon has definitely faced criticism over the years.
They have, and we're going to dive into those criticisms in part 3. We'll look at the other side of the coin, examine the potential drawbacks of Amazon's focus on growth and efficiency.
But before we go there, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, the importance of long-term thinking.
That's a really central concept to Amazon's success, and it's something that's becoming more and more relevant in our world today, where everything is so fast-paced.
We're constantly being told to focus on the short term, chase the latest trend, optimize for instant results. But what Bezos is talking about in this letter, it's a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful achievements come from playing the long game.
It's about having a vision for the future, being willing to make some sacrifices in the present, and sticking to your principles even when things get tough.
And that's a lesson that applies not just to business, but to life in general, whether it's personal goals, relationships, or even bigger challenges we're facing as a society. That long-term perspective can be really empowering.
It's about resisting those quick fixes and focusing on building something that lasts, something with meaning, planting those seeds today that will grow into something amazing down the road.
I know we're almost out of time, but before we wrap up part 2, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Think about your own life, your goals, your aspirations. Where are you playing the short game? Where could a long-term perspective make a difference? What seeds could you plant today that could have a lasting impact?
Those are great questions. I hope our listeners really think about those. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Join us for part 3, where we'll talk about those criticisms of Amazon, the challenges they've faced, and what we can learn from their journey. Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into Amazon's 2004 shareholder letter. We've uncovered some really insightful stuff so far, but like with any success story, there's always another side to the coin, right? Ready to explore some of the tougher questions surrounding Amazon's journey.
Definitely. It's important to acknowledge that While their achievements are impressive, there's also been criticism and challenges along the way. It wouldn't be a true deep dive without considering all the angles right.
Exactly. And one of the biggest criticisms has been about their impact on smaller retailers and suppliers. Some people argue that because they're so big and powerful, it's created this uneven playing field.
It's a valid concern. Critics point to the fact that Amazon can kind of dictate terms to suppliers, which can squeeze their profit margins and make it really tough for smaller companies to compete. There's also been a lot of scrutiny around Amazon using its own platform to promote its own products, sometimes directly competing with the very sellers who are using their marketplace.
So it's almost like a double-edged sword. On one hand, they provide a platform for small businesses to reach a global audience, but then their size and reach can make it tough for those same businesses to actually thrive.
It's a complex issue for sure. There are good arguments on both sides, and it raises some important questions about the role of these huge corporations in our economy. How do we encourage innovation while making sure there's fair competition?
Right, and it's not just the impact on businesses. There have been criticisms of Amazon's workplace culture too. Bezos talks about their dedicated employees in the letter, but we can't ignore those reports of really demanding work conditions and intense pressure to perform that we've heard over the years.
Yeah, some former employees have talked about a very competitive and demanding environment. Long hours and a huge focus on hitting those metrics were apparently the norm. And that raises concerns about, things like employee well-being and work-life balance.
Especially considering that quote from Bezos about working long, hard, or smart, but not 2 out of 3. That definitely gives you the impression of a high-pressure workplace.
It does. And as technology keeps advancing, there are also concerns about automation and jobs. Some people worry that robots and algorithms are going to end up replacing a lot of human workers, which brings up these big societal questions about the future of work and what we can do to address potential job displacement.
It's definitely a lot to think about. Amazon's story is a powerful example of innovation and growth, but it also shows how complicated things can get as companies grow and disrupt industries.
Totally. It reminds us that progress isn't always straightforward. Even the most successful companies face criticism and controversy.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this 2004 letter, what are the big takeaways for our listeners? What can we learn from Amazon's successes and the challenges they faced?
I think this letter gives us a really valuable look into the mindset and the strategies that made Amazon so successful. We've seen how powerful long-term thinking can be, the importance of customer focus, strategic investment, and building a great team.
And even though those principles have led to amazing results, it's clear that we need to have these conversations about the effects of such fast growth, the potential downsides of constantly focusing on efficiency, and the ethical questions that come up when companies become so powerful.
Exactly. Amazon's journey is fascinating. It's full of important lessons, both good and bad. It makes us think critically about the role of technology, the way our economy works, and how to find the balance between innovation and doing things the right way.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's always more to explore. I encourage you to read the 2004 letter for yourselves, think about the ideas we've talked about, and consider how these principles and challenges might apply to your own lives, your work, and your own pursuit of growth and excellence.
Remember, the journey of learning and growth, it never really ends. Stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop asking questions. That's what these deep dives are all about.